Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome back to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Peter Baracchini, and as always, I'm joined by my colleague and fellow Maple Leaf writer over at the Hockey Writers, Alex Hobson. Alex, another eventful week in the books for the Maple Leafs after that, disappointing loss to the Vancouver Canucks last Saturday, but things are looking upward right now. But before we get into the show, how are you doing?
Doing better now that the snow's melted. It was a bit of a rough weekend trying to trek around in the snow, and it seems like we're getting one of those every week. So I'm just glad that it's melted, and hopefully we're trending towards spring a little quicker than usual.
Yeah, daylight savings time, usually that is the beginning of the summer season or spring season, and I just can't wait because, like you, I am absolutely done with winter right now. Don't want to see any more snow until at least next November, December, but we're here to talk about the Maple Leafs, and as we mentioned off the top of the show, it was very eventful, and we're going to kick it off with the win that was, basically heard around, Toronto, Canada, what have you, because that was a thrilling game against the New Jersey Devils. Like, they had a playoff-like atmosphere right there. Obviously didn't have the best start, but they managed to claw their way back to get a 2-1 lead, then lose it, and then Austin Matthews winning it in the dying minutes of that game. Alex, obviously we all know how great Austin Matthews is in key moments, and now that he's starting to get his offensive game back, that is huge. But the win overall for the Maple Leafs, does that serve as, a major boost of motivation after a resilient effort, given the injuries that they were already facing with Ryan O'Reilly and John Tavares out of the lineup?
I would say that it was about as close to that as you can get, because it's just the circumstances of the win and the fact that it was the last game of that big road trip, and a road trip that had some highs, but it also had some pretty low lows. I mean, you mentioned the game against Vancouver, the game against Edmonton also was bad. And I think a lot of it was just, you get the new acquisitions, McCabe, Lafferty, and Luke Shen for a couple of the games as well, Gustafsson as well. You get all those guys basically joining the team on the fly while they're on the road. I think a lot of those guys didn't have a lot of practice in the first few games, and it's just a tough situation that I think some people maybe overlook of how hard it is to slide into that. So to end off the road trip with that thrilling win against one of the best teams in the league this year, I'd have to imagine that I don't know if I'd say I'm confident enough to say that it's gonna spark a massive winning streak or something like that, but I do think it's one of those games that you can look back on and say it really inspired some confidence and sort of got the team moving into a better rhythm. So we'll have to see how these next couple games go. But obviously, they played on Saturday against Edmonton and completed I won't say a similar comeback because they didn't score 7 goals, but they did make it exciting. So who knows? Maybe it's a sign of things to come.
Yeah, we'll get to the Edmonton game as well as like a little bit of a recap because there was a lot that happened in that game as well. But with the Devils win, I think it does serve as some sort of, motivation and confidence boost for this team because they've had, some stretches of games where they aren't at their best and they clearly didn't have the best start, and that trip has been up and down. Like you said, the West Coast swing can take a toll on teams, but the way that they responded and they didn't get down on themselves, that is huge, right? Especially for what this time of season means for them right now, especially heading into the playoffs. I think that is a big boost to show them that, hey, even when things don't go our way, obviously they have the mindset and mentality to dig deep and power through and get back into it. And we've even heard Sheldon Keefe say that they need to do that sometimes, even post-game comments online, where they didn't have the best start and they managed to pull through. And that shows this team is resilient and they can get the job done when it matters. And it does serve as sort of like a precursor to what can happen in the playoffs, because one play and one momentum shift can change the tide of a game. And that could be the difference maker between a game 5 win, a game 6 loss, and then a game 7 win, or what have you, whatever outcome you decide to choose for the Maple Leafs down the stretch. But if they have this in the back pocket to say, hey, we came back against this, highly offensive and, tenacious New Jersey Devils team that can score in bunches and is having a really solid season. They're a top team. We managed to do that. We could do the same for everybody else that comes across our path.
Yeah, I think that should 100% be the message after that game. And what I also thought was really encouraging was the fact that, especially in the wake of Ryan O'Reilly's injury, all the other new acquisitions, or most of them at least, are stepping up and trying to make their presence known early on. They've all contributed in a different way. I mean, you look at what Noel Acciari did, not to bring the Saturday game up again before we talk about it, but you look at what Acciari did against the Oilers on Saturday. Jake McCabe, he arguably saved the game with that blocked shot or blocked cross crease attempt in the game against the Devils. And, this isn't even just this week, but you see what he does in front of the net. He's clearing out the front of the net. He's jumping into the scrum for people who are trying to poke at Murray or get a little too close to Samsonov. They're easily protected by Jake McCabe, and I think that's a big part of the success that they've had over the past couple of games. So, and he throws Sam Lafferty in there too. He hasn't really done anything specifically, but his energy is all over the ice. He's fit in seamlessly on that well with Nylander and Järnkrok. So I think it's been a very encouraging start, to say the least, with all the new faces, and hopefully now that they're back home and getting settled in, we can start to see more of those wins.
Yeah, you mentioned Sam Lafferty too, and obviously that game, you're down two of your top your two of your top three centermen right there. And obviously Lafferty has to be bumped up into that second line role. And a lot of people were hesitant, and all of them are like, oh, here we go. We have Sam Lafferty, bottom six guy as our top six forward. Here we go. Bad move by Dubas kind of thing. But the main thing that I took from that was the speed that Lafferty has would manage to keep up with both Järnkrok and Nylander. And look what happens on that goal. Lafferty is creating the rush, drops it back to Nylander. Nylander goes into the corner. He spots the Järnkrok wide open for that. And even then, they had a couple of great chances, that line, to try and break the 0-0 draw. And they actually got some energy with that line in that second period after a very, let's say lackluster first period, because he got outshot and outplayed big time with Samsonov making some key saves. So I really do think that even though Lafferty has been a little bit more quiet compared to everyone else, he is having that underlying, impact that's very quiet, but it's not going unnoticed.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think was the whole purpose in the Leafs getting Lafferty in that trade with McCabe. Neither of those guys are a top two defenseman or a top six scoring forward per se, but they're guys that can deliver in clutch moments, from what I've seen and from what I've heard, and guys that reshape the identity of this team, or at least an identity that hasn't worked in the playoffs in the past couple of years.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned, about Noel Acciari before, he was on the ball in that game against the Edmonton Oilers, starting the goal scoring and ending the goal scoring with the first goal of the game, as well as the empty net goal in the 7-4 loss. 7-4 win. Sorry. A little bit. See the time change still affecting me a little bit. But, we talk about the depth, and even so, that fourth line in general with Acciari and his presence coming in, you saw his ability to drive hard to the net. And even so, he even drew a penalty in that game that led to, I'm not sure if it was the John Tavares power play goal or the Austin I don't think Austin Matthews got a power play goal, but
yes, he did.
Anyway, it was. So it was a 6th goal. So I'm not sure if it was the Tavares goal or the Matthews one. I want to say it was the Matthews one, because it looked like it was going the opposite direction in the third period. But just to talk about Acciari's presence on that fourth line and what it means to this team right now, that they have a player with grit, speed, and that, kind of playoff factor that'll bode well for them down the line.
I mean, all you got to do is just look at his stat line yesterday, and it pretty much tells the story of what he's been like in Toronto. I mean, the 2 goals are obviously a little bit of an outlier, but 5 hits. I think he had 2 block shots or something like that. He's just all over the ice. He's keeping the energy of that bottom 6 up. And I find that he does a great job of limiting easy opportunities for opposing head coaches. I found that in the past, in not to single out any specific lines, but say, for example, a fourth line that had Jason, and I'm not singling out Jason Spezza because, bless his heart, he's the best. But Jason Spezza be on that fourth line and say, I don't know, Andre
Wayne Simmons and
Kasha.
Clifford.
Yeah, like a fourth line in the past like that, I find that, as effective as they can be, if the opposing coach throws out a couple of star players like McDavid and Draisaitl on Saturday, it could backfire on you big time because, you're getting some of your players down there trapped against some of the top stars in the league. But Acciari, I find, is one of those players who can match up well against anybody. I mean, all he has to do is play his game, which is grit, throwing the body, chipping in offense here and there, blocking shots. I mean, he's just one of those guys that he contributes in every aspect of the game, and his effort leads the way. So I think when you got more guys like that in your bottom six, and ideally in the playoffs, Sam Lafferty's in the bottom six as well, and he's another guy who plays a very similar game to Acciari. So I think that once you get there, I mean, Acciari is going to be one of the reasons the Leafs fourth line succeeds if it does. So.
And I believe this is the second time that he got the team belt post game. I know
he's only been here for like 10 games or something.
Yeah. And that says a lot about his character, the effort that you mentioned that he puts in. And it's the way that he plays is very steady, very calm. He doesn't panic, and he gives that fourth line a new identity where they're going to be a little bit more competitive and a little bit more impactful than what we saw in the past. So that is definitely a great sign for Acciari. But I think the bigger note is, unless you want to jump in for a quick second before
I was just going to say, I think that even when the Leafs acquired Noel Acciari to begin with, remember I said that when I think of the Bruins teams that eliminated the Leafs in 2018 and 2019, I thought of guys like him more than I thought of Boston star players. I'm just saying, like, you look back to teams that eliminated the Leafs, it was always guys like Acciari getting the job done. So, I guess if you can't beat him, join him. It's I guess sort of opposite for the Leafs, but
I mean, we have said this multiple times. I know you and I, we always talk back and forth, but Acciari himself, I always hated with the Bruins, but I love them as a player, and good thing that he's with the Maple Leafs right now. And I even made like kind of a bold prediction yesterday. I think that, in the playoffs, when your depth is very important and crucial and can step up at key times, Acciari seems like a player that can score a goal-defining moment in Game 7 or win the series for them and be the unlikely hero kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the Maple Leafs may have a secret weapon in that because he can score a timely goal that can really change the momentum.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more.
Still sticking with that Edmonton game, obviously, the Maple Leafs are wanting to get some revenge, especially the star players, because they didn't have the great game that we had expected in the first meeting between the Oilers and the Leafs. This time around, it was a different story. Although Edmonton's star players shine with McDavid and Draisaitl, the Maple Leafs top four, or core four, let's go with that rather, core four forwards had a combined, I want to say 13 points or 15 points, 13 points. Marner with 4, Matthews with 2, Nylander 2, and John Tavares with 3. So if my math is correct, that is 13 points combined between the 4 players, including getting some on the power play, 5-on-5. I want to get your take on how important the goal scoring and even the offense has been, spread out amongst the 4 top players, because even so, that game doesn't change the momentum if Marner doesn't, intercept that first pass and then he just basically dangles in front of Stuart Skinner. Sorry about that. In front of Skinner, and then he scores that beautiful goal. And then minutes later, he does the same thing. Seal the puck, passes it over to Nylander. Nylander scores, and then that's just a barrage of goal scoring that this team can score in bunches.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, and I don't like taking specific games really and comparing them to playoff games, because what happens in the playoffs happens in the playoffs. It's almost always an entirely different story than anything that happens in the regular season. But when I look at what happened on Saturday against the Oilers, when Mitch Marner, saw his team go down, stepped up, intercepted the puck, scored one of the potential goals of the year, it was phenomenal. I think that's sort of a testament to what needs to happen in the playoffs for the Leafs. And that's something that, as better as Marner and Matthews were against Tampa Bay last year, I think that there's still another gear to be taken there. And we sit here and talk about, do the Leafs need to add a top 6 forward? Do they need to add a top 4 defenseman? Do they need to get good goaltending?
Mm-hmm.
I'll always maintain the belief that Marner, or whether it's Marner or Matthews or Tavares or Nylander, one of those 4 guys just needs to step up and take control of the game. And if that happens in the playoffs, I mean, I see these guys winning around this year. I think it really just comes down to that. And you saw the impact that it can have on a game when, Connor McDavid was in that hockey game. Leon Draisaitl was in there. Hyman and Nugent Hopkins. The others have their stars as well, but they were silenced after Marner did that. They didn't have an answer for the Leafs after Marner took control of the game. And you saw he does it, and then Nylander scores, then Tavares scores, and then Matthews scores. It's a chain reaction. So they just need to keep it up. They need to be able to rely on their star players to come in and change the pace of a game like that.
Absolutely. And even when you look at Natural Stat Trick, they have these game flow and heat map charts. You can notice how impactful the Maple Leafs were in front of the net, and even the change of tide, where they were still maintaining possession of the game, where it was in their favor. Even though it was 3-1, they still didn't waver and fall back. It was all because of Marner and that resilient effort that led to everything and the barrage of goals happening. So that is going to be I do agree that they have found that extra gear. I think they just need to find that consistency just a little bit. I know that sounds pretty counterintuitive, looking at how elite level they are. But like you said, the results in the playoffs matter. They had that last season against the Tampa Bay Lightning in the finals, where all 4 did their job, including Morgan Riley. Now the same thing. It looks like the offense is poised to do some damage again this time around down the stretch and into the postseason as well. So we'll see how that plays out, but it does look like a great sign for Marner, Matthews, Tavares, and Nylander that the offense is still coming. The fact that they're still producing, it's a really great sign that none of them have gone very cold as of late.
Yeah, I agree. I think that right now is probably the worst time of the season for any of those guys to go through a slump. So, if it takes watching Matthews go a couple of games without scoring a goal in January, or vice versa with Marner back in October, November, whatever, I mean, I think you can stomach that just so that they're not slumping at the end of the year.
Absolutely. And before we get into the second part of our show, this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Hockeypedia. Have you ever been looking for details on a team's player list? Do you want to know the Toronto Maple Leafs Stanley Cup history? Yes, we get it. 1967. Get a new joke. Who was in the 2015 Stanley Cup playoffs? What are the NHL awards and what's their history? If you're interested in these or any other hockey questions, make sure you check out and bookmark the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia page, an ever-growing collection of hockey resources that is invaluable to any fan looking for information. Look for a link in the show description below and dive in today. All right, now as we get started off with the second part of our show, it was a great win for the Maple Leafs against the Oilers, but it didn't come with, any type of controversy or, backlash or comments or, animosity between players, because the officiating was, in a nice PG way to say it, it was very questionable and very disappointing to witness. With that, you see a lot of, retaliatory penalties being called against the Leafs. There's a Tavares / on Desharnais, but that wouldn't have happened.
There were like 4 different coinciding penalties called, which I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that in a long time, at least.
And then, as there is a cross check, Tavares had enough. He gives him a whack. And then all of a sudden, you also see the incident that happened between Evander, Kane, and Michael Bunting, where they're, pushing each other back and forth. And you see the play unfold in front of the refs. Both get not thrown out, but tossed into the box for offsetting minors. Post game, we heard Evander Kane say this about Michael Bunting: he likes to dive and embellish. We want to get that out of the game. I don't know where to begin, because that embellishment, I'm going to save my comments for after you, Alex, but what do you take of, Evander Kane's comments? Because they look like, there wasn't just embellishment on the Maple Leafs side, but also on the Oilers.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of shocking for me to find out that nobody on the Edmonton Oilers ever dives or embellishes. That's Pretty riveting information there, Evander. But yeah, that's obviously the starting point, I think. But I do like Michael Bunting's reaction to it because
Yes. Doesn't have time.
I mean, I think, it was a pointless attempt to start beef. I mean, you can look at McDavid multiple times during that game last night, and just multiple times throughout the season. Like, players on the Oilers dive as well. It's not exclusive to Michael Bunting. And, I did like that he kind of threw in what seemed like a subtle little shot too, when he said, yeah, I'm not the type of guy to bring stuff like that to the media. So, who knows? I mean, the Leafs and Oilers obviously aren't going to play again this year unless they meet in the Cup final. And if that were to happen, wow, would that ever be entertaining?
Sparks will fly.
But I mean, right now, I think it was the right path for Bunting to take, and a little rich for Kane to say something like that. But who knows? I guess we won't see another chapter of this story until next time they play.
Yeah. So what I took from that is it's very ironic because Evander Kane was the main reason why Bunting was, flopping and falling all over the place, because he's trying to get away from him and join the play. And yet Evander Kane doesn't want him to go and join the play. And to me, if he's saying, oh, Bunting likes to flop, well, you were the result of him falling all over the place. And then Bunting literally just had enough. And then it went into a shoving match, and, we know how things unfolded after that. But it just didn't make sense to me why he would, let's face it, players need to stop embellishing. There's no doubt about that. We need to get that out of the game. But at the same time, if Bunting is doing everything he can to try and avoid any situation or trying to take a penalty against Evander Kane, and Kane's involved with that, you are the direct cause of said embellishment kind of thing. So I really don't get it. There was really no point to bring that up. But then again, you could complain about Michael Bunting all you want. You could complain about how he draws penalties, or he complains that he doesn't draw a penalty. But from what I've seen, Michael Bunting does not flop or embellish, or whatever you want to call it, after these last 2 seasons seeing him play. He plays hard and he's a pest, but I don't think, a diver or embellisher is the right way to call him that. And going into kind of our final question before we get into a little bit of a rapid fire segment, I guess you can try and incorporate that into the rapid fire if you want to take a good, minute 30 to try and answer this question.
Already got
Alex,
my answer.
There you go. Who do you think is the best new addition for the Maple Leafs? It can even be Luke Schenn, despite him only playing 2 games.
I got to say Jake McCabe. I just think that he's been such a stabilizing presence on the back end for a Leafs defense that I think, as much as we hated the Muzzin Hall pairing, it's been rough with no Jake Muzzin on the back end. And McCabe, I think, has a little more bite to his game. He's a little more physical than Muzzin was. He's younger, and he still plays that strong defense. And I think that type of defenseman is what they've needed for a long time. And I love that he's already jumping in to defend his teammates and scrums and stuff like that, like I said earlier. So I think that O'Reilly could very well be the Leafs' best addition by the time we get towards the playoffs. But just in terms of how nicely he's adapted, I'd have to say McCabe.
Absolutely. And a big shout out to Luke Schenn, who his wife did give birth to a new baby. Their news broke earlier today. As a result of that, he is making his way back to Toronto. So we will start to see Schenn in a little bit more game action now that the new baby Schenn has arrived. So congrats to both of them on that. And we talked about him before. I'm going to say Noel Acciari, and this isn't a slight towards Schenn, McCabe, all these new additions bring something to the table. But I think with the Maple Leafs, the fourth line was going to be something that they needed to address. Because as we mentioned before, if you have another slow and ineffective fourth line against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they have Pat Maroon, Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, and Corey Perry as agitating and, angry, I'm trying to find the word to put this, how much of time changes is getting to me. I'm just going to say this. Going up against those guys is not very fun. And the Maple Leafs, however, managed to find a key player that can, maintain or have that competitive edge. And we see how Zach Aston-Reese plays, how he's kind of the Maple Leafs leader in hits right now. But if you were to bring Acciari into the mix, or if they would have got him, Shen, or McCabe a little bit earlier, he would have some competition, as all four would probably be leading the way in that category. But I think having a player that's a little bit more competitive and can lead the charge on that fourth line can match up against the Lightning, and that's going to be key down the line. So given how we have seen Acciari play recently, how he continues to score and score timely goals, I think he is my best new addition to this team.
Yeah, I have a hard time disagreeing with that. Granted, like I said, I think every acquisition, maybe except for Gustafsson and even Shen, just because they haven't really played all that much. I think every new acquisition's fit in really nicely. So can't really fault any reasons for that.
Absolutely. And as we get into our rapid fire questions, this is going to be a little bit, again, very, very short responses, Alex. I'm going to start off with this. Mitch Marner, he was very, very close to hitting the 100-point mark last season. It would have been, I can't remember the last time a Maple Leaf or two Maple Leafs had 100 points back-to-back. Matthews and then Marner was just shy of that mark, but through 65 games, he has 83 points right now. According to Hockey Reference, he's on pace for another 30-goal season and 102 points. Alex, I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
Is Mitch Marner going to hit the century mark this season finally?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
He would have hit it last year if he didn't get injured. I think as long as he doesn't have the worst slump of his career in these last couple games, I think he's going to hit 100 for sure.
I wouldn't necessarily say it was the injury or even the COVID, situation that he faced, because he was like literally above a 2 point per game or close to that in the second half. If he didn't have the slow start, I think would have been the big reason why for that. He probably would have made it, but he's been very consistent this season with the point streak that he had early on, making Maple Leafs history. The fact that he's still being consistent right now with multi-point games and, getting in on the attack for, goals, multiple assists, I do think that he will crack the 100 point mark this season.
There you go.
And second rapid fire question. This is in regards to Matthew Knies. He already has 40 points in his NCAA season. Just got a really nice assist as well. I believe in one of their playoff games where they're going to the Big Ten championship right now. Again, 40 points in 35 games, 21 goals on a very stacked Gophers team. If and when Knies makes the jump, do you think, or where do you pen him in the roster? It could be the second left wing, the third left wing. What do you think is a more reasonable spot for him?
I think they start him as the third line left winger. It'd be a bonus if they got Yarncroke back into the top six and maybe gave Knies for, say, O'Reilly and Lafferty to play with. I think that'd be a nice little pairing. And then I think from there, if he impresses, I think they move him up to the second line. And if he struggles, I think they keep him on the fourth line. Either way, though, I don't think that there's really going to be a bad place to put him, because even if you put him on the fourth line and he's not really doing anything offensively, he's still bringing the energy. So
I agree. I think no matter where you put him, he is going to succeed and thrive and everyone is going to look at the fact that, he's getting outproduced by, Logan Cooley and Jimmy Snuggerud, two rookies or freshmen for that matter. But Knies has a very complete, well-rounded game, being a factor on both sides of the puck. He's physical, he's engaging, he's got that shot and release. And I think he's improved his foot speed a little bit more, because I know that was one area where they wanted to focus in on him, or where he wanted to focus on. And I think he's done a great job improving on that aspect throughout the whole entire season. So he has the strength and physicality to play at the NHL level. He has the foot speed to keep up. He has the offense, and he has the defensive minded side to his game as well. So no matter where he is, he's definitely going to be a very impactful player come, the time when he signs his ELC, come playoff time. I think you don't want to put a lot of expectations on a rookie, but I think he can provide a lot of value no matter what. Once again, that is all for this episode of Maple Leafs Lounge. Thank you again for tuning in. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Hockeypedia. There's going to be a link in the description below for all the hockey knowledge that you require. Once again, for Alex Hobson, I am Peter Baracchini, and we will see you next time on the Maple Leafs Lounge.